be able to see my screen. Should say HTMA basics. Yes, awesome. All right. So let's just go through real quick. Resources, I just keep that one in for you guys so you have it. So today we're doing the calcium potassium ratio. So we've completed sodium potassium, sodium magnesium, and calcium magnesium. Do you remember what each one signifies? So just make sure as we're going through here, you guys just keep top of mind. Sodium potassium, right, is the sodium potassium pump, which is the super important one. That is that stress vitality ratio. Sodium magnesium is going to be the adrenals. Calcium magnesium is going to be glucose and cardiovascular. So then what is the calcium potassium ratio? What does that represent? So that represents the thyroid. So the thyroid ratio should be around 4.2. And there are small windows around the optimum, just like with the other ratios. If this goes down towards under 4.2, you're going to have faster thyroid activity. So you're going to have more of a hyperthyroid dynamic. And if it's 6.2, you're going to have a slower thyroid activity. So more of a hypo dynamic. So think about the ratio and what it means. When it's high, we're saying there's more calcium relative to potassium. And when it's low, we're saying there's less calcium relative to potassium. And it's just like we said with the calcium magnesium ratio, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that potassium's high. It just means relatively speaking. So estrogen to progesterone, right? Relative to the other. These two need to be in a balance to keep the thyroid happy. So remember, we're talking relatives here. So you're going to take the total calcium divided by the total potassium to get the calcium potassium ratio. So here it's 14 divided by 9 is going to give you 1.56. And if we go back, 1.56 is over here. So you're going to expect faster thyroid activity when you've got a low number, a low ratio. All right. I want to make sure that I'm hitting all the high points here too. Relative. Sorry, I just want to make sure. It's hard when I don't have, when it's just Julie and you're not conversing, so it's all right. But if you have something, one new message. Search engine use a given post. Yes, I can do that. I'll have to go back and see what I said. So, um, so I think it's important when we're looking at ratios and things that we think again about, last week we talked a little bit about personalities, right? And what's the personality of calcium? And when we think about calcium, it's stiff, it's strong, it's dull, it's quiet. We talked a tiny bit about the calcium shell. And when calcium is high and overloaded, you can have those repressed emotions. You can have that that blocking of the cell membrane and making it harder for things to move in and out. Calcium is stoic. And when we think about potassium, what's the personality of potassium? It's going to live inside the cell. It's going to be gentler, softer, unassuming, a bit shy, always willing to help where needed. It's going to control fluid balance, but from a weaker place than sodium, which is super stimulating, right? When you think of potassium, I want you to think reliable, passive, calm, submissive. Um, it's very unassuming. Um, right? So, how is thyroid hormone used in the body? And this is where I wanted to get you guys to, um, oh, wrong way, sorry. Where I wanted to get you guys to kind of fill this in. Um, how, when you think of someone that's got thyroid issues, what, thyroid problems, thyroid symptoms, what does the thyroid control? Um, Lee, if you want to type some stuff in the chat, I know you can't talk. Um, but I will fill this slide in. I just want to get your opinion on, yeah, metabolic rate. Um, I really think about the thyroid, and when I talk about it, it's like stepping on the gas, right? The thyroid controls the gas and the brake in the body, the energy levels. There's a lot of things that the thyroid actually does. Um, It stimulates movement. It's the regulator, the thermometer. It can affect the heartbeat. It controls the rate at which dying cells are released. So think about apoptosis and the body's detox and cleanup mechanisms, right? If you've got an underfunctioning thyroid, are you really able to clear that cellular debris and get rid of cells that maybe aren't functioning as well? Um, and I didn't necessarily think about that when I thought about the thyroid. I mean, I know it kind of controls like energy and metabolism and things like that, but I didn't really think of it on the other side. Um, so when Jen brought that up, she was like, that was one of the things that kind of surprised her too. And I was like, yeah, if it's really controlling like how much your body can handle, I think about that, right? Sluggish thyroid, sluggish everything. If the thyroid doesn't think your body can handle something, it's going to slow things down, and it's going to slow everything down. Um, so it's going to slow that down also. Um, and it was brought up that it's going to control other hormones, like it's going to impact estrogen and progesterone production. It's going to, um, I think you need to take all of it into account when you're looking at what thyroid hormone is used for. Um, so when calcium is high, right, you're looking at this calcium potassium ratio, right? I always want to like make sure that we know what we're talking about here. So when you're looking at calcium to potassium, and what happens when you have a high level of calcium? Um, and you have that calcium shell, maybe cell permeability is going to be reduced when you have a calcium shell. So Dr. Ack, Dr. Watts are the two scientists that really got into HTMA, and he's noted that excess tissue calcium tends to harden cell membranes and can decrease the cell permeability. And this is important to know in order to evaluate other conditions such as hypothyroidism, in which thyroid hormones may not then cross into cells properly. Decreased cellular permeability due to a calcium shell may also affect other hormone imbalances, nutrient deficiencies, and detoxification of cellular waste products. So when somebody puts up a wall, they're putting up a wall to almost everything that's entering into their cells. So remember, if calcium is in the hair, it's also not available to be used. So it's not doing its job. According to the Trace Element Lab, the inhibitory action of calcium, my mouth isn't working today, sorry guys. The inhibitory action of calcium on the thyroid has been suspected since the last century, but more recent studies have confirmed its effects. It is known that calcium decreases thyroid activity and that calcium absorption is increased in thyroid insufficiency. Vitamin D would also be considered to contribute to lowered thyroid function due to its close synergistic relationship to calcium. Notes, guys. All right, flip back to my summary instead of my. Let's see, with a high ratio of calcium, it's going to be hard for the hormone to enter the cell and support function in the body. This is why a high calcium to potassium ratio signifies low thyroid activity. Potassium, which creates a sensitivity to the hormone and sustains cell membrane permeability, also needs to be optimal for the hormone to enter the cell. And we know that calcium and copper both antagonize potassium. So, this is why when we see some of these ratios and you look at the HTMA and there's um, that copper piece that goes into it, because they all affect each other. Um, right, let me go to this part of the transcript. All right. Um, make sure I'm not missing anything. Um, this did not really transcribe this very well. I'm trying to read this gibberishly. It's hysterical. Okay. So a lot of times you're going to see mineral levels on an HTMA, and they may or may not correlate to exactly what you're seeing in the blood. And I don't want you guys to be confused by that. I want you to realize that um, you may see like a perfect copper level or a perfect calcium level on blood labs, but what you're seeing in an HTMA is what's happening once those minerals leave the bloodstream and enter the tissues. So it's not always going to correlate. And it's not always going like it would be really awesome if all of our clients perfectly fit all the patterns and it all made sense. But sometimes it just doesn't. Um, so, you know, if you start looking at it, you're going, if you're confused, sometimes there's a reason for that. And it is this paradox, right? When you're looking at two things that say the exact opposite. Um, but we learn to live with those things. The body does some strange things sometimes to keep things proper and in balance and working. Um, so look at these symptoms and I'm going to read through them and let me know what you think it sounds like. Acne, weakness, tired or cramping in arms or leg muscles, numbness and tingling, constipation, excess water consumption, depression, nausea or vomiting, edema, fatigue, insomnia, nervousness, mental impairment, abdominal cramping and bloating, fainting due to low blood pressure, and heart palpitations. What does this sound like? You got a guess, Lee? If someone has maldigestion and they're not being absorbed, a lot of times you'll see a four lows pattern. Um, And there can be hidden calcium shells and hidden other things just because they are functioning in this super, super low pattern. That's why a lot of times I don't really pay attention to much else. When I see a four lows pattern, it's kind of a hard stop. That's telling me, confirming the fact that there's definite maldigestion and malabsorption because they're not even getting, you know, a normal level of minerals. Um, Once you start repleting those, then some of these other patterns will pop up. So once you start getting people to absorb, then you might see a calcium shell become very evident. Then you might see a different pattern emerge where you're seeing then the loss because there's imbalances that pop up. Um, but before that, you'll probably see that maldigestion and that malabsorption in a low pattern where calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium are all rock bottom and you're not going to see much variation. So, and yes, they will still be pushed out through the hair. You'll still have some of it leave. Um, yeah. So I look at some of these and I think, right, thyroid adrenal, there's some HPATG axis serious hormonal, right, stuff. But these are also all signs of potassium deficiency. And they're strikingly similar to those that have hypothyroidism. Um, Maybe they don't all line up, but I mean, they rarely all do, right? So it's it's hard to label things, right? We're very, very quick to use labels with our client and say, oh, you're hyper or you're hypo or you're this or you're that. And just like when doctors put people in a box, right? We tend to do that with our clients too. We tend to say, oh my gosh, they've got leaky gut. Well, do they? Like sometimes, like maybe that's part of the picture, but try to avoid putting even functional labels on people until you can get to the point where you're saying, yes, they're eating a good diet. Yes, we've got them hydrated. Yes, they've got good electrolyte balance. Yes, we've worked on digestion and supported that. Yes, they're digesting. Then, when that stuff is sufficient, then all sorts of things are going to come out and you're going to see, just like when you fix a four lows pattern and people start coming out of that, other things will pop up because once you give them what they need, the body might decide to really boost the immune system and go after that simmering infection that's been there in the background that they weren't able to deal with. You have no idea what the body might do when you give it what it needs. So if someone with hyperthyroid condition who's a slow oxidizer and with symptoms of both hyper and hyperpothyroid, and they have a high calcium to potassium ratio, what are we going to be considering? Well, this is a paradox. This is one of those clients where you're looking at them, and because someone with hyperthyroid, right? The body is hyper, it's pushing on the gas. Why would they have a slow oxidizing pattern or a slow metabolic pattern? That's opposite, and they have symptoms of both, and then they have a high ratio, which means they should be hypo, not hyper. What other things are we going to be looking at? This is where you have to know your client because you're going to, it's just like other blood work, right? When it comes to the thyroid, most authorities of HTMA agree that you can easily have an opposite blood level from the HTMA. So what's in the blood is not what's in the cell or in the tissue. So where else do we see high blood levels of nutrients and it's actually lower in the cell? You have a thought on that? So what nutrient? What nutrient level? I know there's a lot. I mean, when I remember first starting SAFM and, looking at blood labs and looking at all these symptoms and then coming to a level and going, why is that level that should be deficient? They're showing all the signs of a deficiency of this nutrient, but their blood labs are high. And we see that with a few different nutrients. So have you ever seen a client who's had all the symptoms of a deficiency, but then you look at their labs and it's A-OK in the bloodstream? Magnesium, yes. Zinc, B12 is another one. So there's a lot of times you'll sit there and go, they've got muscle cramping and, they've got anxiety and restless leg, all these things, right? Where you think they need magnesium, they need magnesium, they need magnesium, and you look and their magnesium looks great. And you're like, what the heck is going on? Right? Because what you're seeing in the blood may not be getting into the cell. What if they have a huge calcium shell, right? And they can't get any of that magnesium. It's not getting into the cells. If there's a different absorption issue with B12, right? If there's a lack of a cofactor to get iron into hemoglobin, right? We've seen all of it, right? Where they have high ferritin, but aren't making hemoglobin. So there's a lot of different places where nutrient levels don't necessarily match up. And that's where it's so nice on an HTMA to be able to see what is actually leaving the bloodstream and what is the body doing with it on a tissue level, on a cellular level, to see the other side of that coin. Because you might see normal magnesium in the blood and a huge magnesium loss on the HTMA, and you can go, there it is. We're not holding on to any magnesium. So even though the magnesium is being absorbed and it's in the blood, it's leaving in massive quantities through the hair. So yes, there's signs of magnesium deficiency. And pouring more magnesium, right, into the body isn't going to keep it anymore. It's not going to keep it there. You can give them magnesium all day long and it's not going to help. You have to figure out, why is the body losing magnesium? So, anyway, this is a potassium broth recipe that is shared on Sassy Holistics. The gal that runs Sassy Holistics very much thinks in functional wellness terms. So she's got a lot of great things on using like herbal infusions. And I know we haven't even gotten there yet, but that's another really fun topic. I love for people in Four Lows programs to use nettle infusions, because nettles have in liquid form a ton of nutrients, ton of iron, just lots of really great things. They're great for people with high histamine. The only thing that they're lacking is sodium, and that is fixed with a pinch of sea salt. But if you guys haven't used herbal infusions before, that should probably be one of the very next things that I share with you is how to use herbal infusions. But this is a potassium broth recipe that she has. You put all the ingredients in a pot, fill it with water, simmer it for about a half an hour, and then throw the parsley in there. You can strain out the veggies and then just store the liquid in the fridge or freezer and use it. And you can aim for half a cup to a cup a day. So if somebody is needing potassium support, this is a really great way to get it. So. And to go back here, this is our guidebook. And in our guidebook, we have the personality characteristics of the minerals. So here's calcium, which is lumbering, large, big boned, solid, lazy, dullish. Heidi did a great job with these graphics. Magnesium, who it's the efficient assistant, small, thin, strong, and calming. Sodium, which is the mover. It's tall, thin. You can think of it as a little bit more anxious. And then potassium, which is the quiet supporter. It's medium height, it's strong, it's pensive. So if you can kind of think of some of the things and the jobs that these things do around the body, it might help you. Um, it might help you figure out, when people have high ratios, when there's too much calcium around, when um, or too much sodium, or whatever the pattern may be. That is all I have for today. So